In 1848, Frédéric Soriot, a French artist, prepared a series of 4 prints visualizing his dream of a world made up of democratic and social republics, as he called them. Soriot personified liberty as a female figure recognized by the torch of enlightenment she bears in one hand and the charter of the rights of man in the other. The paintings depicted shattering of absolutist institutions with rise in nationalism and utopian vision. In 1882, the French philosopher Ernest Renan, 1823-92, defined nation as culmination of a long past of endeavors, sacrifice, heroic past, great men, glory, that is, the social capital upon which one bases a national idea. A nation is therefore a large-scale solidarity. Its existence is the daily plebiscite. French Revolution in 1789 was the first clear expression of nationalism. Before the revolution, France was an absolute monarchy. Revolution brought sovereignty so that French people, who constituted the nation, could shape its destiny. From the very beginning, the French revolutionaries introduced various measures and practices that could create a sense of collective identity amongst the French people. Steps taken to forge a collective identity are given. A centralized administrative system and uniform laws for all French citizens. New hymns were composed, oaths taken, and martyrs commemorated. Idea of la patrie, the fatherland, and les citoyens, the citizen. A new French flag, the tricolour, replaced the former royal standard. A States General was elected by active citizens and renamed the National Assembly. Uniform system of weights and measures. French, as it was spoken and written in Paris, became the common language of the nation. Internal customs duties and dues were abolished. The revolutionaries wanted to liberate the people of Europe from despotism and help them to become nations. Students and other members of educated middle classes began setting up Jacobin clubs all over Europe. French army moved into Holland, Belgium, Switzerland, and much of Italy in the 1790s and began to carry the idea. In 1804, Napoleon declared the Civil Code of or Napoleonic Code. It did away with all privileges based on birth, established equality before the law, and secured the right to property. Napoleon introduced many reforms in occupied territories. In the Dutch Republic, Switzerland, Italy, and Germany, Napoleon simplified administrative divisions, abolished the feudal system, and freed peasants from serfdom and manorial dues. Peasants, artisans, workers, and new businessmen realized that uniform laws, standardized weights and measures, a common national currency, no guild restrictions, better transport and communication would improve work opportunities. Initially, the French army was welcomed as harbingers of liberty, but they soon faced hostility in many places, such as Holland and Switzerland, as well as in certain cities like Brussels, Mainz, Milan, and Warsaw, as the new administrative arrangements did not give political freedom. The painting by the German painter Karl Caspar Fritz depicted occupation of the town of Zweibrücken by the French armies. This is a sarcastic reference to the claim of the French as being liberators who opposed monarchy in the territories they entered. Napoleon here is represented as a postman on his way back to France after he lost the Battle of Leipzig in 1813. Each letter dropping out of his bag bears the names of the territories he lost. In mid-18th century Europe, there were no nation-states as we know them today. There were many small kingdoms, duchies and cantons, and autocratic monarchies. The only tie binding these diverse groups together was a common allegiance to the emperor. The aristocracy. Landed aristocracy was the dominant class on the continent. The members of this class were united by a common way of life that cut across regional divisions. This powerful aristocracy was, however, numerically a small group. Common ways of life of the aristocracy are: they owned estates in the countryside and also town houses. They spoke French for purposes of diplomacy and in high society. Their families were often connected by ties of marriage. New middle class. The majority of the population was made up of the peasantry to the west. The bulk of the land was farmed by tenants and small owners in the Eastern and Central Europe. The pattern of landholding was characterized by vast estates which were cultivated by serfs. With industrialization in mainland Europe in 19th century, a working class population and middle classes made up of industrialists, businessmen, professionals emerged. Among the educated, liberal middle classes with ideas of national unity following the abolition of aristocratic privileges became popular. Meaning of liberal nationalism. The ideas of liberty, and national unity went hand in hand in the early 19th century Europe. Since the French Revolution, liberalism stood for end of autocracy and clerical privileges, a constitution, ownership rights of private property, and representative government through parliament. However, liberal nationalism did not stand for universal suffrage. Men without property and all women did not have political rights. Only under the Jacobins, all adult males enjoy suffrage. The Napoleonic Code limited suffrage and reduced women to the status of a minor, subject to the authority of fathers and husbands. In the economic sphere, liberalism stood for the freedom of markets and the abolition of state-imposed restrictions on the movement of goods and capital. In 1834, a customs union or Zollverein joined by most of the German states. The union abolished tariff barriers and reduced the number of currencies from over 30 to 2, created a network of railways, tying up economic interests to national unification. After the defeat of Napoleon in 1815, European governments were taken over by conservatism and re-established traditional institutions of state and society with some changes. A modern army, an efficient bureaucracy, a dynamic economy, the abolition of feudalism and serfdom strengthened the autocratic monarchy. The Bourbon dynasty, which had been deposed during the French Revolution, was restored to power. France lost the territories it had annexed under Napoleon. A series of states was set up on the boundaries of France to prevent French expansion in future. Thus, the Kingdom of the Netherlands, which included Belgium, was set up in the north, and Genoa was added to Piedmont in the south. Prussia was given important new territories on its western frontiers. Austria was given control of northern Italy. The German Confederation of 39 states that had been set up by Napoleon was left untouched. In the east, Russia was given part of Poland, while Prussia was given a portion of Saxony. Conservative regimes were autocratic. They did not tolerate criticism and dissent, and sought to curb activities that questioned the legitimacy of autocratic governments. The memory of the French Revolution, nonetheless, continued to inspire liberals. Rules of the club are given. Silence is the first commandment of this learned society. To avoid the eventuality whereby a member of this club may succumb to the temptation of speech, mussels will be distributed to members upon entering. Inscription on the plaque: the most important question of today's meeting: how long will thinking be allowed to us? After 1815, liberal nationalists became underground. Secret societies and revolutionaries like Giuseppe Mazzini opposed monarchy established after the Vienna Congress. They fought for liberty and freedom and creation of nation-states. Italian revolutionary Giuseppe Mazzini founded underground societies called Young Italy in Marseilles and Young Europe in Bern, with members from Poland, France, Italy, and the German states. Mazzini wanted to forge small states and kingdom into a single unified Italy within a wider alliance of nations. Educated middle-class elite led the liberal nationalists' revolutions. The first upheaval was in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings were overthrown by liberal revolutionaries, and a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head was installed. When France sneezes, Metternich once remarked, the rest of Europe catches cold. The July Revolution sparked an uprising in Brussels, which led to Belgium breaking away from the United Kingdom of the Netherlands. A struggle for independence amongst the Greeks from the Ottoman Empire began in 1821. Nationalists in and outside Greece mobilized public opinion to support its struggle against a Muslim empire. Finally, the Treaty of Constantinople of 1832 recognized Greece as an independent nation. This painting depicts an incident in which 20,000 Greeks were said to have been killed by Turks on the island of Chios. By dramatizing the incident, focusing on the suffering of women and children, and using vivid colors, the painting sought to appeal to the emotions of the spectators and create sympathy for the Greeks. The romantic imagination and national feeling. Educated middle-class elite led the liberal nationalists' revolutions. The first upheaval was in France in July 1830. The Bourbon kings were overthrown by liberal revolutionaries, and a constitutional monarchy with Louis Philippe at its head was installed. Nationalism feeling came through. Culture, art and poetry, stories and music, wars and territorial expansion. The Grimm brothers considered collecting folk tales and developing the German language as part nation building with wider effort to oppose French domination. Even though Poland no longer existed as an independent territory, national feelings were kept alive through music and language. Karol Kopinski made folk dances like the Polonaise and Mazurka into nationalist symbols. The use of Polish came to be seen as a symbol of the struggle against Russian dominance. hunger, hardship, and popular revolt. The 1830s were years of great economic hardship in Europe. In 1848, there was widespread food shortages and unemployment. Economic hardship in Europe are more seekers of jobs than employment. Rural population migrated to the cities to live in overcrowded slums. Stiff competition from imports of cheap machine-made goods from England. Aristocracy enjoyed power, peasants struggled with feudal dues and obligations. The rise of food prices, or a year of bad harvest. Enormous increase in population all over Europe. The economic hardship brought the population of Paris out on the roads. Barricades were erected and Louis-Philippe was forced to flee. A National Assembly proclaimed a republic, granted suffrage to all adult males about 21, and guaranteed the right to work. National workshops to provide employment were set up. In 1845, weavers in Silesia had led a revolt against contractors who supplied them raw material and gave them orders for finished textiles but drastically reduced their payments. 1848, the Revolution of the Liberals. In the German region, a large number of political associations came together in the city of Frankfurt and decided to vote for an all-German National Assembly. In the parliament, women were admitted only as observers to stand in the visitors' gallery. Friedrich Wilhelm IV, King of Prussia, rejected the new constitution and joined other monarchs to oppose the elected assembly. In the end, troops were called in and the assembly was forced to disband. Though conservative forces were able to suppress liberal movements in 1848, they could not restore the old order. Monarchs granted concessions to the liberal nationalist revolutionaries. After 1848, the autocratic monarchies of Central and Eastern Europe abolished serfdom and bonded in Habsburg dominions and in Russia. The Habsburg rulers granted more autonomy to the Hungarians in 1867. After 1848, nationalist sentiment was mobilized by Germany and Italy for promoting state power and achieving political domination over Europe. After the National Assembly was disbanded by Prussian force in 1848, Prussia took on the leadership of the movement for national unification. Otto von Bismarck carried out unification of Germany with the help of the Prussian army and bureaucracy. 3 wars over 7 years with Austria, Denmark, and France ended in Prussian victory. In January 1871, the Prussian king William I was proclaimed German emperor in a ceremony held at Versailles. The proclamation of the German Empire in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, Anton the Kaiser, the Chief Commander General von Roon, and Bismarck. During the middle of the 19th century, Italy was divided into 7 states, and the Italian language had not acquired one common form and still had many regional and local variations. Sardinia-Piedmont was ruled by an Italian princely house. Southern regions were under the domination of the Bourbon kings of Spain. The north was under Austrian Habsburgs. The center was ruled by the Pope. In 1830s, Giuseppe Mazzini wanted to form a unified Italian republic. After failure of revolutionary uprisings, both in 1831 and 1848, Sardinia-Piedmont ruler King Victor Emmanuel II unified the Italian states through war. Giuseppe Garibaldi, 1807–82, supported Victor Emmanuel II in his efforts to unify the Italian states. In 1860, Garibaldi led the famous expedition of the Thousand to South Italy. They were popularly known as Red Shirts. It was only in 1870, when during the war with Prussia, France withdrew its troops from Rome, that the Papal States were finally joined to Italy. In Britain, the formation of the nation-state was a long drawn-out process. Before 18th century, the people of British Isles had ethnic identities such as English, Welsh, Scot or Irish. Each ethnic groups had distinct cultural and political traditions. The English Parliament had seized power from the monarchy in 1688. It helped forge nation-state with England at its centre. The Act of Union 1707 between England and Scotland that resulted in the formation of the United Kingdom of Great Britain. England imposed its influence on Scotland. Scotland's distinctive culture and political institutions were systematically suppressed. The Scottish Highlanders were forbidden to speak the Gaelic language or wear the national dress, and large numbers were forcibly driven out of their homeland. Ireland was deeply divided between Catholics and Protestants. The English helped the Protestants of Ireland to establish their dominance over a largely Catholic country. Catholic revolts against British dominance were suppressed. After a failed revolt led by Wolfe Tone and his United Irishmen 1798, Ireland was forcibly incorporated into the United Kingdom in 1801. A new British nation was forged through the propagation of a dominant English culture. The symbols of the new Britain, the British flag, Union Jack, the national anthem, God Save Our Noble King, the English language, were actively promoted, and the older nations survived only as subordinate partners in this union. Artists in the 18th and 19th personified nations as female figures. The female form was not a particular woman in real life, but an abstract idea of nation in a concrete form. That is, the female figure became an allegory of the nation. Marion represents French Republic. The first images of a woman wearing a Phrygian cap, a symbol of liberty and the Republic. During the French Revolution, artists used the female allegory to portray ideas such as liberty, justice, and the Republic. These ideals were represented through specific objects: liberty with red cap or the broken chain, while justice is generally a blindfolded woman carrying a pair of weighing scales. In France, female allegory of the nation was christened Marianne, a popular Christian name. Her characteristics were drawn from those of liberty and the Republic: the red cap, the tricolour, the cockade. Statues of Marion were erected in public squares to remind the public of the national symbol of unity and to persuade them to identify with it. Marian images were marked on coins and stamps. Similarly, Germania became the allegory of the German nation. In visual representations, Germania wears a crown of oak leaves, as the German oak stands for heroism. Allegory: when an abstract idea, for instance greed, envy, freedom, liberty, is expressed through a person or a thing. An allegorical story has two meanings, one literal and one symbolic. In 1860, the artist Lawrence Clason was commissioned to paint this image. The inscription on Germania's sword reads, "The German sword protects the German Rhine." Nationalism and idealistic liberal democratic sentiment was lost by last quarter of the 19th century. The major European powers manipulated the nationalist aspirations of the peoples in Europe to further their own imperialist aims. After 1871, there was nationalist tension in the Balkans. The Balkans was a region of geographical and ethnic variation comprising modern-day Romania, Bulgaria, Albania, Greece, Macedonia, Croatia, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Slovenia, Serbia, and Montenegro, whose inhabitants were broadly known as the Slavs. A large part of the Balkans was under the control of the Ottoman Empire. Disintegration of the Ottoman Empire made this region very explosive. One by one, its European subject nationalities broke away from its control and declared independence. As the different Slavic nationalities struggled, the Balkan area became an area of intense conflict. Each power, Russia, Germany, England, Austro-Hungary tried to counter the hold of other powers over the Balkans. This led to a series of wars in the region and finally the First World War. Nationalism and imperialism led Europe to World War I in 1914. Many countries colonized by the European powers began to oppose imperial domination. The anti-imperial movements were nationalist and was inspired by a sense of collective national unity forged in confrontation with imperialism. The idea that societies should be organized into nation-states came to be accepted as natural and universal.